cyclocross friends, and welcome back to the Heat Check. If this is your first time here, go back and watch episode 1, or you'll be lost in all of the intricate storylines and carefully developed plot we constructed last week. I kid, you'll be fine. We're here to count down the top 11 movers and shakers in the men's and women's fields in North American cyclocross using some sort of system or algorithm I've decided to call Brian. And we're starting with the women. In 11th place. Actually, before I get to the 11th spot, I need to talk about Taylor Cook-White, who didn't make it to Rochester and therefore dropped out of the heat check. However, if I had to do it all over again, Taylor would probably still be around 7th. But her bike with the cantilever brakes, it would make it up to at least 3rd. You guys in the comments love those canties. So just for you, here's a clip of Stibar and Sven at Hogerheide in 2014 showing off those last gen canties. If that doesn't get the clicks, I don't know what will. Okay, enough fun. Power rankings are serious business and we need to get back on track. In 11th place is Alyssa White. The Fincraft Junior cycling standout was 9th on day 1 of the Rochester Junior women's race, but she bounced back to 2nd on day 2, earning her 11th in the heat check. In 10th place is Lydia Sport of the Future Cusack. The CXD Trek Bikes barrier hopper follows up her junior women's win on day 2 in Roanoke with a win in Rochester on day 1, and a 3rd place on day 2. Which brings us to Raphael Carrier in 9th place and our first real heat check in the power rankings. Other than coming in 2nd to Ava Holmgren at Canadian Cyclocross Nationals last year, this is her first UCI race weekend and she ticked off a 2nd place on Saturday and a win in sloppy conditions on Sunday. Carrier gets 9th in her debut. In 8th place is Ella Brennanman. The first year U23 racer finished 8th on day 1 at Rochester and 9th on day 2. More importantly, she took one for the team last week after a top 10 finish in Roanoke should have secured her a spot in the power rankings. However, the CXD Trek Bikes rider got sacrificed for a Rochette-related gag at the top of last week's rankings, and when informed, was a good sport about it all. In the 7th spot is Raylan Nuss. She falls from 4th last week with a 5th place on day 1 and 7th place on day 2. Going to be looking for the return of that Raylan mojo at Charm City. In 6th on the heat check power rankings is Lauren Zerner. 7th place on day 1 and 4th on day 2 at Rochester has the Groove off-road racer climbing up the standings, but staying in a holding pattern on the heat check. In 5th place, it's Kaya Musgrave. A 6th place on day 1 and 5th on day 2 catapults Musgrave from off the charts to 5th. Another big heat check. We saw what was to come last weekend in Roanoke with an 8th place finish on day 2, and she made sure it stuck this weekend. In the 4th spot is Sydney McGill. 2 trips to the podium for McGill helps her move up from 5th last week to 4th this week. The heat check podium is a tough peak to summit, but McGill is right there, ready for her ascent. At number 3 is Isabella Holmgren. Talk about your heat checks. Holmgren toes the line for a cyclocross race for the first time this season and pulls off an impressive 4th place in her first UCI Elite race. The junior cyclocross and mountain bike world champ follows that performance up with a scorcher, leading the race for several laps on Sunday and making Magali Rochette work hard to bring her back. Mags got her in the end, but not before Bella almost drained the half-court heat check. Baller move from the taller twin. In 2nd place, it's Caroline Mani. According to the history books, France outlawed capital punishment and the use of the guillotine in 1981. However, it seems like nobody told the Canadians because Sydney McGill's front wheel went straight to the neck on Sunday in Rochester after Mani's high-speed yard sale right in front of her. Nothing Sid could do to avoid her, but knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. Many may have been battered, but she got up and got back into the fray, finishing 6th. This is after she finished 2nd on day 1. That no-quit attitude and slew of 2nd places in the USCX series keeps her in 2nd place in the heat check. Before we get to the top spot, did you know that before Rochester was incorporated as a city in 1834, it was known as the village of Rochesterville? Did you also know that after being called Rochester for almost 200 years, in 2023 they officially changed the name again to Rochettester? Yeah, Rochettester rolls right off the tongue. Rochettester. No surprises, no gags, no tricks up my sleeve. Despite having to work for it on day 2, Magali Rochette reigns supreme and holds on to the #1 spot in the Heat Check Power Rankings. While you take a look at the women's top 11 and pause to make sure I spelled all the names correctly, we're going to move on to the men. In 11th place is Marcus Shelton. Holding it down for the Bear squad, Shelton is consistently cracking the top 10s in the UCI Elite men's field and consistently cracking the power rankings. In the 10th spot is David Thompson. The guy went so fast in the junior race, he somehow folded time and caught the tail end of the men's elite race that happened 2 hours in the future. At least that's how it looks in the heat check. Go figure that one out, Einstein. At number 9 is Scott Funston. The happy fun ball makes his return to cyclocross with 2 8th place finishes, which in heat check math gets you the 9th spot. In 8th place is Jules Van Kempen. This may be the heat check, but when I walked into the Cervelo Orange Living tent this past weekend, I swear the temperature dropped. It was cold in there. Last week's perceived snubs for Van Kempen and Musgrave cut deep, but maybe that was the incentive they needed. A 6th and 11th place on the weekend for Jules gets him to 8th in the heat check. At number 7 is Curtis White. A 4th and 7th place aren't what we're looking for from the national champ, and I don't think it's what he's looking for either. But we did get a little heat between the mayor and the happy fun ball. It brought us right back to Falmouth on last year's US finale, where these two ended the day with a spicy hot salute off. In 6th place is Michael Vandenham, a 5th and 6th place for MVDH at one of his favorite US tracks. Michael and his dad Watts are trending up. In the 5 spot, it's Lance Hayden with possibly the biggest heat check of the weekend. Trading in the gravel bike for the, Trading in the gravel tires for the cyclocross tires, Hayden jumps into the deep end and hangs on for dear life. The power rankings are not necessarily cumulative or the best result overall. It's about who has the heat. And for Lance Glenn Fry Hayden, the heat is on. And the salad bar is open. Just look at that lettuce. In 4th place is Anton the Feed Ferdinand. Still searching for that win, Ferdinand finished 2nd on day 2 after getting disqualified on day 1 for an illegal feed. Possibly related, did you know that in Franz Ferdinand's song Always Ascending, the chorus starts out, waking up dry, waking up dusty, feeling remorse, feeling thirsty, bring me a cup, bring me water. Alex Kapranos is cyclocross Nostradamus. It's all right there. On the 3rd step of the heat check is Andrew Strohmeyer. The Big Dig continues to be the instigator in these USCX races. There is no letting up when he's in that front group, and the tenacity is starting to pay dividends. 2nd place on day 1 and 5th on day 2, Strohmeyer is the baseline of cyclocross's funk soundtrack, always prominent in the mix. Which brings us to 2nd place and Loris Rue the Day Rouillet. Last week he may have been Rule the Day Rouillet, but he took the L in Rochester and it demoted him to Ruing the Day. Rue, taking the L, it looked really good on paper, but now that I'm reading it aloud, it's just a hot mess. Kind of like how Loris was this weekend. He still did enough to only drop 1 spot from last week, but his observe and report strategy in the lead group didn't pay off for the wins this week. And that's because Vincent Bastains, the new dangler, pulled off the comeback story we didn't know we needed. Fighting through a broken body following a training crash, Vinny B didn't think he'd win another UCI race before hanging up his bike at the end of the season. But the clock never struck 12 in Rochester, and Vinny Rella took not only 1 win, but a pair of them. Storybook finish for the king of the USCX. Can't wait to see what he does in Baltimore next week. And that's it. Your power rankings in the men's field. While you take a look at the top 11, I'll remind you to subscribe to the CX Hairs Bulletin at cxhairs.substack.com and go to cxhairsdistro.com to buy a cyclocross themed t-shirt or a PDF of the Skills, Drills, and Bellyaches book. Thanks for watching the Heat Check. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and give yourself a little pat on the back for a job well done. We'll see you back here soon, but until then, hang in there, kid.